Hey guys, welcome back to r/ProRevenge. In this video, a homeowner association fined me for simply walking my dog, claiming that I was violating the HOA bylaws. I got the ultimate revenge by taking away their property instead. Let's dive right into the video. The title story starts like this. A little background about me is that I used to own a small software consulting firm. I was living in a crappy house, working very long hours, and dealing with some of the most impossible people that you could imagine. I've dealt with what I assumed could be the worst of the worst types of people in the world. I have spent, adding up, easily over 100 hours just getting yelled at by clients for things that were not even my fault. Clients that got angry that they could not access the internet or programs when the problem was their computer was broken or just not connected to the internet. Clients that wanted things we did not even provide, like creating software and not seeming to get it through their heads that they are not hiring the right company for that. You can imagine the level of stress and brain rot the kind of work that would cause, and I could never run the company without doing the same work I expected employees to do. I won't even get started on issues regarding hiring and handling employees. I think I made it clear why I was totally burnt out from work and in need of some serious change in my life, so I did not totally go insane. Now, the business was very successful actually, considering its size, and I made a deal to sell my company to a larger group that did the same type of work. I got a big sum that I was able to semi-retire with. I'm not fully retired since I still do some freelance work for coding in my spare time, nothing crazy, but enough that I don't need to be stressed out or too bored at the same time. I also decided a change in scenery was needed, so I moved to a new suburban development. I did know that it had an HOA, but when I was buying the house, the real estate agent assured me that they were very relaxed and I might not even realize that I was part of one. I believed that blindly, not really thinking too much into it, and well, I also did not move alone as I had my buddy Albert. He is a golden retriever that I had for many years and for a long time was the only thing keeping me sane and from falling apart. No matter what happened, he was there for me and is my best friend in the entire world. Now, Albert seemed to enjoy the move because it meant more space for him to walk around in. And with me being retired, it meant more time to play, relax, and hang out in general. Albert was almost 10 years old when we moved in, so he was not a young dog. Actually, the vet classified him as a senior dog, even though he did not act like one. He seemed to believe that he was still a puppy and acted accordingly. After the move, one of our favorite activities was taking long daily walks together. It was peaceful for me and it seemed to make him happy as well. I had access to more than just a house and yard though. My house backed onto a walking trail that kind of did a loop going a little bit into a wooded area. The realtor explained to me that this trail was common space for all residents in the development. Many like to use it for a running trail and there were no rules regarding dogs being banned or anything, and I found myself using it a lot with Albert, with it being convenient. There weren't any problems with it right off the bat, and I made sure to always keep Albert on a leash. If other people were around, which was not super common, they would either just run around us or sometimes want to stop and say hello. Albert loved friends, and the fact that he was walking around with a tennis ball in his mouth, basically proving that he was the friendliest boy around. Now for the HOA, I did not really get to know them much in the beginning of me living there. I assumed it was the realtor, said with them being quiet and just not really a big deal here. It turns out that I had just not met the woman that ran it yet. That would all change one morning when I ended up running into the big Karen herself. I did not know at that exact moment that she was a Karen, but from stories I would hear from neighbors that I spoke to, it turns out she really was one. She was extremely harsh about the rules and felt her position gave her more power than it did. She would even make people move their cars at the local stores because she needed a closer one. That was a new one for me to even hear about Karens and could not believe it. I guess I had a certain image with Karens, but that could be from my job in the past being mainly over the phone. I expected her to wear a ton of makeup and have giant hair or something, wearing furs or leopard print or something, and being a little intimidating looking with her size. Instead though, I was met that morning with a woman that could barely be 5 feet tall, wearing normal jogging clothing like anybody else. As soon as she saw me, she walked in front of me and Albert and just stood there with her arms crossed. I asked her if there was something wrong, and she right away exerted her position and telling me that she was the HOA president and never saw me before. I explained that I was new, but she just seemed to keep staring at Albert. She did not want to be friendly and instead started telling me that I was already breaking the rules and not even telling me what I was breaking until after about 3 times of me asking. Then she said that I was breaking the rules because I was letting Albert walk with me on the trail, making faces like I was an idiot, and that it was obvious what I was doing wrong. Well, I never saw any rule about no dogs, and there were rules posted on the trail about no smoking and no bikes and things like that. I asked her why it didn't say that on the signs, and she said because it was obvious. That a dog walking on the trail was because it was damaging to the environmental preservation of the trail. As if it wasn't man-made or my dog's feet did any more damage than mine. Anyway, I did not want to argue, since if it was really a rule, I admit that I broke it. I was able to look at the HOA rules online, and when it came to the trail, no rules regarding no dogs were listed, but I did not stop walking with Albert since it was not against the rules and did not run into Karen again there. But a few days later, I got something in the mail from the HOA. It was a $250 fine from them. They claimed that I owed it due to animal damage to landscaping. So that was for $150, and another $100 was for unauthorized use of private HOA trails. This made me angry because Albert did not cause any damage, and I knew I did not need permission to use the trail. I had the ability to try and take the fine to the HOA and appeal it, so that was clearly the next step I took to get things back on track. The HOA refused my appeal and pointed out 2 things within the HOA handbook. The first being that if an animal damages any public HOA property, then they are allowed to charge a fine. The second being that I was supposed to go to a meeting and introduce myself to the HOA before I was even allowed to start using their services, which included the trail. The handbook was over 200 pages long and clearly had these tiny things so deep in it that nobody would read it. It seemed really scummy to me. I also just want to mention, in case people want to say, well, if Albert did his business on the trail, that would be wrong. And well, if he does go, it is on a tree and not where people would walk. If it is something else, then I make sure to pick up after him. I would be the first to admit that letting a dog just go on the trail would be a problem, but that was not the end of the whole appeal because it was not done in some private manner that most people would be comfortable with. I had to appeal it at the HOA meeting, so my first time in front of my new neighbors and everything. It turns out that Karen has friends on the board of the HOA, and they felt it would be fun to try and belittle me in front of everybody else. That I was clearly new and just wanted to start trouble to gain attention and local fame. I was also accused of bringing down the image of the neighborhood by moving in with such a large dog. Then they were trying to claim that a large dog near where children play could be dangerous, and they were even thinking of creating rules to stop vicious dogs, as they said, like Albert, into the neighborhood altogether. These HOA people were totally cracked. It did not stop after the meeting either, because Karen and her board friends would now go out of their way to make me as unwelcome and uncomfortable as possible. Making fun of the way I say certain words because I grew up in a different area than them. Just an example being that I call soda pop and they act like I'm speaking an alien language. At least other people were nice to me and didn't do that, but it made me dread going out knowing I had the chance to run into one of them. They act as if I did something personal to ruin their lives when all I did was move into a house that was for sale. I pay my HOA dues, I pay my taxes, I should be allowed to live without being harassed just because I own a dog. While some others were nice to me, I would say the reaction of most people around here to what Karen did and how she speaks to me is apathy. Well, maybe that's the wrong word because I can see in their face that they do care and feel upset that she is saying these things, but they refuse to speak up against Karen and they almost seem scared to seem too friendly towards me. It was clear that Karen had some iron grasp on the entire neighborhood. I would not be surprised if somebody was extremely nice to me publicly and then got a random fine in the mail the next day or something. One thing I didn't do after that meeting was pay the fine though. I was not done fighting and it had nothing to do with the money. I could afford to lose it, but I knew the moment I paid, I would be opening a floodgate to let Karen walk all over me. You can maybe guess from my previous job that I was a bit of a nerd growing up and knew what a bully looks and acts like. I would not fall into the same kind of traps 12-year-old me would have. Humiliation was something I could brush off if it meant that I could still fight. This was a lot of backstory, but I promise from here, there's going to be a lot of action and some revenge too. So going with my own background, people might know that when nerds grow up, they are not only harder to pick on, but they really know how to fight back. My brains were about to come in handy, and Karen was not gonna know what hit her. What I wanted to know was more about that trail, and by more I mean that I fell down a rabbit hole so deep, I'm shocked I did not see a white rabbit holding a watch. Now, a lot of what I found were things that ended up having no point or no bearing on anything. Seriously, I was able to find out the exact type and rough number of trees in that forest area, I was able to find out how rich the soil there was, and honestly, I don't know how I managed all that. I did find one thing that was the smoking gun for this story. So that trail was in fact not owned by the HOA. What happened was that the developers of the land still had ownership of certain parts of it, a few of the newer homes being built that didn't sell yet, and some natural land. Most important was the fact that the trail was still owned by those original developers. It is part of a 3-acre area that they held on to ownership of. A few areas did actually get sold to the HOA, but this trail was not one of them. Now, while it might sound totally out of my work background, I'm familiar with things regarding business acquisitions. I noticed that the developers were slowly selling some of their remaining land and had a hunch they wanted to just be done with it so they could focus on building a new one or maybe just retiring and living off the money. Their future intentions were not important to me, only their current ones. I was able to reach out to them and see if they were planning on holding onto all their land, and I found out that they were trying to divest the smaller parcels of land because it was not worth the tax they were forced to pay on them as developers. I found this information very interesting and put in an inquiry about the land that was being used as a trail and if that was also something they were looking to divest. It was, and while I didn't do anything about it at that moment, I started to get a plan in my head. Meanwhile, Karen was not letting up on me and wanted to make sure that I didn't forget about her or the fact that she hated me. I was being issued more fines for things that did not even make any sense. One of them was a leash length violation. She claimed Albert was on too long of a leash and causing problems. I don't use one of those retractable ones, so his leash is a pretty normal length. Plus, he heals me almost all the times that we are walking anyway. Another fine was about failure to dispose of pet waste in an orderly manner. Again, total BS since I threw it in my own trash cans. It was clear that all these violations were targeting poor old Albert. The good news is that he doesn't know what a fine or violation is, so he remained happy. The rest of the HOA board were just as bad as Karen, and I noticed them taking photos of Albert and I during our walks. One of them even filed a fake complaint with the police that my dog was being extremely aggressive, and always was. Animal control came and had to check Albert out. He just saw them as new friends though, and started kissing them and wagging his tail. They understood the claim was clearly fake and did not do anything. Plus, when they heard his age, I could see them roll their eyes about getting called about a senior dog. Sometimes I tried to get a little revenge on what was going on. Like the one time when the HOA fined me for having my yard be a total mess, aka a tennis ball was left outside in my yard. I can understand how that is totally inexcusable. Since we all know tennis balls are very hazardous material, I fixed the problem though and made sure to buy Albert a ton more tennis balls to keep in the yard. I can only imagine Karen's face when she saw that one. My biggest worry at that moment though was whispers I was hearing around the neighborhood. Karen was apparently planning on taking that 3-acre land and removing the trail and the trees. She wanted to create a picnic area, and this would not be open to the public. In fact, it would not even be open to all HOA members. She wanted to make it so only those with minimal fines and those who owed no money were allowed. With non-HOA residents being able to pay some exclusive membership in order to use it, money I highly doubt would end up in an HOA fund and instead right in her own pocketbook. I knew that I had to make my move soon, and I actually teamed up with my neighbor. She was an older woman named Miss Wen, and she seemed to hate Karen even more than I did. She spoke to me about Karen being blatantly racist and giving her a really tough time during the pandemic specifically. She was the perfect person to help take Karen down since her past job was as a land assessor. She knew Karen was doing something highly illegal and wanted to help me out. The two of us reached out to the developer and explained that we wanted to make a cash offer on that 3 acres of land that had the trail. The idea of near asking price and a cash offer is something hard to resist to people wanting to get rid of the land as soon as they could anyway. They finally agreed, but we were smart not to buy it using our names. We used a shell LLC, which, when used correctly, can actually help us protect our assets and keep the tax cost for the land a lot lower. Best of all, it meant that if Karen looked into land ownership, she would not see that we did it. Karen was about to get not only screwed over because of that, but because of her own precious handbook as well. There was a clause in it regarding private purchase of a piece of land that the HOA was using as common use. They were not allowed to use it anymore unless the current owner gave explicit permission to them. So yes, they were going to lose total access to it because of that, but I was going to wait to burst her bubble until the right moment. That day came when Karen called for a neighborhood unity picnic. That was her name for it, but it was actually pretty exclusive and she didn't want to let most people be part of it. It was her start to turning the area into picnic grounds and even had the tables and everything being delivered. She was met with me standing at the entrance and refusing to let anybody in. I told her that she was on my land and I wanted her to leave right away. I was ready for something like this because I was not showing up to this party alone. I had a sheriff deputy, a land surveyor, and a printed deed showing that I owned this property now. Karen did not seem to care though, and instead was more focused on screaming that I had to move out of the way and let her pass by. Also that I was not invited and the paper must be just fake. I knew she might freak out, which is why I was able to get the deputy involved, explaining beforehand that she was about to try and throw a party on my property and I needed somebody there because I knew she would not willingly leave. I was ready to make my announcement and it was gonna be loud and clear. Me, with my ownership, all current access to this trail and forest land are revoked. Any violators will be trespassed as this is not HOA property. It is my private land and until I say otherwise, I'm not allowing access to anybody and especially not HOA members. A lot of murmuring was happening, but Karen did not seem very intimidated. She told me that I was clearly making things up and told the deputy that he had to make me move because I was blocking her access to HOA property. It was now his turn to lay down the law with Karen. He told her that he confirmed that I was apparently the legal owner of the land and he would have to enforce the trespassing warning that I gave her. So yes, she was not allowed to set up the place as a picnic spot. Karen got on her phone and tried to show off that the land was actually owned by an LLC and said that the LLC was actually the HOA's. Well, my paperwork showing that I owned the LLC was also something the deputy had access to, and when Karen realized the LLC and myself were on in the same, she went pale. After the failed event, I decided to put up a bunch of my own signs regarding the trail. I did not want to keep everybody out, so instead I devised something that I thought would be a good middle ground. I had signs claiming it was private property and there was no HOA access to keep them out. I also had a fun sign that said "Dogs welcome, humans must be kept on leash." I also installed a system that gave me remote access to let people into the property. This way I had control to make sure Karen did not get in. My favorite thing is that about once a week now, I hold dog days where everybody is encouraged to bring their dogs out. However, certain members of the neighborhood, including all HOA members, are banned from the premises unless they got a dog. The dogs are allowed off-leash to run around a fenced area, people bring coolers and chairs, and it is just a bunch of dog lovers relaxing. Albert loves seeing the other dogs and just being able to run around crazy with them. Now, Karen did try and sue me, but it led to nothing. I clearly owned the land, but she did manage to expose herself and the plan she had to privatize the land. Several board members ended up stepping down, and I got a letter saying that all my fines had been forgiven. I really think she just did not want to end up in court with me about that. Albert gets to enjoy his golden years now, walking on the trail and enjoying what retired life can really offer. And well, all they had to do was let an old dog be left alone and it would have saved them so much trouble. Instead, they found out what messing with a man with money, free time and a love for his dog and zero tolerance for bullies would do to them. And before we end the video, we will read one last satisfying petty revenge story that is titled "I Destroyed My Boss's Career." And by the way, if you have any petty revenge stories to share from your own life, then please feel free to leave them in the comments because we would love to read them. So anyways, a few years back, I got hired as a supervisor for a local government. My job was to help supervise about 10 employees. Above me was a manager. This guy was a terrible leader and would often yell at people, make slurs, give impossible tasks or deadlines. On my third day in, he yelled at me to learn how to do my damn job in front of the employees. He made snide remarks to other employees that he was gonna terminate me on probation. He also demanded that I keep a communication log with every task he assigns me and update it as I complete them. He also chastised me my first weekend for not having any questions emailed to him by the end of the week. He basically told me that he expects me to send 3 questions every week until I am off probation. The next week I sent him 3 questions as required, and he replied back to look up the answers myself. You can see he was out to get me. He would give a task and then another task and then ask me why I did not get the first one done, and I also found out that he wrote the old supervisor that way until he got enough dirt on him to then terminate him. I decided it was wartime. I kept a log of every perceived policy violation, broken rule, inappropriate comment, and people who witnessed it. I also engaged other supervisors and employees from other departments. After 28 days of employment, I was ready to quit. I kept a resignation letter in my car, and that gave me the power that I needed to press on. After 28 days, I filed a formal complaint with HR, and at that time I convinced the other supervisor to do the same. After that, several employees filed complaints and a group complaint was filed as well. HR investigated the complaints and the manager was placed on administrative leave. The investigation concluded that the manager did violate numerous policies, created a hostile work environment, and he ended up resigning. Since then, he has been burning bridges at every employer, 3 so far, and went from a manager of 15 employees and a great pension making $95K a year to a low-level laborer employee making about $25 an hour in a hole-in-the-wall facility. To be fair, he created his own problems, I just helped HR see it. And yeah guys, that is the moral of the story. If you mistreat people, you might as well go from $95K a year as a manager to $50K a year as a laborer. And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my binge watch playlist for endless videos, and I will see you again tomorrow.